Imagine standing at the edge of your potential, looking out at a vast landscape of possibilities. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, what's really holding you back? I want you to think about the last time you said, I can't, or it's not possible, or my personal favorite, I'll do it tomorrow. You see, I was once where many of you are right now. I remember sitting in my small apartment, staring at a wall of bills, telling myself the same story many of you tell yourselves. This is just how life is. But let me tell you something profound. Every excuse you make is a brick in the wall between you and your dreams. Every time you say, I'm not ready, I don't have the resources, or it's not the right time, you're actively choosing to build that wall higher. I stand before you today not as someone who was born with exceptional advantages, but as someone who made a decisive choice. One day I looked in the mirror and realized that my excuses had become my identity. And in that moment of brutal honesty, I made a decision that would transform my entire existence. You see, success isn't about having no obstacles. It's about refusing to let obstacles become excuses. The most dangerous conversations are the ones we have with ourselves, where we negotiate our dreams away piece by piece, excuse by excuse. Right now in this room, there are two types of people. Those who will continue to perfect the art of excuse making, and those who will decide today to demolish every excuse they've ever created. The question is, which one are you going to be? Because here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. Your excuses or your dreams, you can't have both. They cannot coexist. Every time you make an excuse, you're choosing to trade your potential for temporary comfort. Today, we're going to do something different. Today, we're going to kill those excuses, one by one, until all that's left is the raw, unstoppable power of your true potential. Let's dive deep into understanding what excuses really are. Because before you can kill something, you need to know exactly what you're dealing with. Excuses are not just words we casually throw around. They're sophisticated defense mechanisms we've perfected over years of avoiding discomfort and fear. Think about this. Every single day, millions of people wake up with dreams, aspirations, and goals. Yet by the time they go to bed, they've convinced themselves why those dreams have to wait another day. I'm too tired. The timing isn't right. I don't have enough money. Someone else is doing it better. Sound familiar? These aren't just casual remarks. They're the silent assassins of your potential. Let me share something powerful with you. Excuses are like painkillers. They provide temporary relief from the pain of responsibility. When you make an excuse, you get an instant dose of comfort. You don't have to face the uncertainty. You don't have to risk failure. You don't have to deal with the judgment of others. But like any painkiller, the relief is temporary and the underlying problem remains untreated. The most dangerous thing about excuses is how logical they sound. They dress themselves up in the costume of reason. They present themselves as wisdom, as prudence, as common sense. I should wait until I have more experience. Sounds responsible, doesn't it? I need to learn more before I start. Seems wise, doesn't it? I'll begin when conditions are perfect. Appears prudent, doesn't it? But here's what's really happening. Every time you make an excuse, you're training your mind to focus on problems rather than solutions. You're programming yourself to see obstacles instead of opportunities. You're teaching your subconscious mind that you're not capable, not ready, not worthy. Let me tell you something that might shock you. Your excuses are not protecting you. They're imprisoning you. They're not keeping you safe. They're keeping you small. Every time you make an excuse, you're essentially saying, I choose comfort over growth. I choose the known over the possible. I choose mediocrity over excellence. And the most insidious part, excuses breed more excuses. They multiply like viruses. One excuse leads to another. And before you know it, you've built an entire fortress of reasons why you can't achieve what you want. I don't have time becomes I'm too old. I don't have the right connections becomes it's not meant for people like me. But here's where it gets interesting. The same energy you use to make excuses could be used to find solutions. The same creativity you employ to justify why you can't do something could be channeled into figuring out how you can do it. The same mental effort you expend on explaining why something won't work could be invested in making it work. Think about the most successful people you know or admire. They face the same obstacles you're facing. They had the same 24 hours in a day. They dealt with the same uncertainties, the same fears, the same doubts. The only difference, they refused to let their excuses become their reality. You see, excuses are like a comfortable prison cell. The walls are familiar. The routine is predictable. The risks are minimal, but so are the rewards. And while you're sitting in that cell, life is passing by. Opportunities are slipping away. Your potential remains locked inside, waiting to be released. Today, I want you to understand something crucial. Your excuses are not facts. They're not unchangeable truths. They're stories you tell yourself. And just like any story, you have the power to change the narrative. You have the ability to write a different ending. Because here's the ultimate truth. The quality of your life will be determined by your willingness to face the very things your excuses are protecting you from. Your success will be measured by your ability to push past the comfortable limitations you've set for yourself. Let's get to the core of where excuses come from, because understanding their roots is crucial to eliminating them. Every excuse you make has a deeper story, a hidden narrative that's been playing in your subconscious mind, often for years. First, there's fear, raw, primitive, and powerful, but not just fear of failure. Sometimes it's the fear of success that paralyzes us more. Why? Because success means change, and change means leaving our comfort zone. Success means new responsibilities, higher expectations, and increased visibility. Some of you are making excuses, not because you're afraid you'll fail, but because you're terrified of what might happen if you succeed. Think about your childhood for a moment. How many times were you told to be realistic, to play it safe, to not get your hopes up? These messages didn't just disappear, they became the foundation of your excuse-making machinery. Your environment programmed you to doubt yourself, to question your capabilities, to settle for less than what you're capable of achieving. Society has perfected the art of creating excuse makers. Look around you. The world is full of people who have mastered the ability to explain why they can't, why they shouldn't, why they won't. It's become socially acceptable, even encouraged, to have a ready-made list of reasons why you're not living up to your potential. But here's what's fascinating. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a real limitation and an imagined one. When you repeatedly tell yourself you can't do something, your mind accepts it as truth. It becomes your reality, not because it is real, but because you've convinced yourself it is. The cultural conditioning runs deep. We've been taught to seek permission, to wait our turn, to not rock the boat. These societal norms have become the fertile soil where our excuses grow and flourish. We've been conditioned to believe that playing small is being humble, that settling is being realistic, that mediocrity is being practical. Your past experiences have also shaped your excuse-making patterns. Every time you tried something and it didn't work out exactly as planned, your mind filed that away as evidence to support future excuses. Every criticism you received, every setback you encountered, every disappointment you faced, they all became ammunition for your excuse arsenal. But here's the liberating truth. Understanding these roots doesn't mean you have to be bound by them. Knowing where your excuses come from is the first step to breaking free from their grip. Just because you were programmed to think small doesn't mean you have to continue operating on that outdated software. The roots of your excuses may run deep, but they're not unbreakable. They're not permanent fixtures of your personality. They're learned behaviors, and anything that can be learned can be unlearned. Your past may explain your excuses, but it doesn't have to justify their continued existence in your life. Now let's get personal. It's time to look in the mirror and be brutally honest with ourselves. Pull out your mental notepad because we're about to do an excuse inventory that might make you uncomfortable. And that discomfort is exactly where your growth begins. Let's start with the classics. The excuses that roll off your tongue so smoothly you don't even recognize them as excuses anymore. I don't have enough time. Really? Or are you spending 2 hours every night scrolling through social media? I don't have the money. Yet you find funds for those weekend outings or the latest gadgets. I'm not ready yet. The question is, will you ever feel completely ready? These are what I call your comfortable excuses. They're socially acceptable, easily defensible, and nobody will challenge you on them. That's precisely what makes them so dangerous. They're the perfect hiding place for your unfulfilled potential. But let's dig deeper. There are more subtle excuses lurking beneath the surface. I'll wait until my kids are older. Once I get that promotion, after I move to a better city, these are your delayed action excuses. They push your dreams into some mythical future where conditions will be perfect. But let me tell you something. Perfect conditions are a mirage that keeps moving further away the closer you try to get. Then there are what I call the comparison excuses. Someone else is already doing it better. The market is too saturated. I'm too young to start. These excuses sound like wisdom, like you're being realistic and pragmatic, but they're really just fear wearing a mask of rationality. Here's a powerful exercise. For the next 24 hours, carry a small notebook. Every time you say, I can't, I should, or but, write it down. You'll be shocked at how many times you make excuses without even realizing it. These unconscious excuses are like invisible chains holding you back. Pay special attention to your language patterns. When you say, I have to, instead of I choose to, you're making an excuse. When you say, that's just how I am, instead of that's how I've chosen to be, you're making an excuse. When you say, if only, instead of I will, you're making an excuse. And look at your relationships too. Are you surrounding yourself with excuse makers who validate your limitations? Are you part of a social circle that celebrates mediocrity and calls it contentment? Sometimes our biggest excuses come disguised as well-meaning advice from others. The most dangerous excuses are the ones you're most convinced are true. They're the ones you defend most passionately, the ones you've built your identity around. I'm just not a morning person. I'm not good with numbers. I'm too introverted for that. These aren't facts. They're choices you've made so many times they feel like facts. Remember, identifying your excuses isn't about shame or guilt. It's about clarity. It's about seeing the invisible barriers you've placed in your own path. Because once you see them clearly, you can begin to dismantle them. Let me tell you about a revolutionary concept that will transform your life. Absolute, uncompromising, total responsibility. Not the kind of responsibility you're thinking of. I'm talking about something far more powerful. When you take complete responsibility for your life, something magical happens. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of your destiny. But here's the part that most people aren't ready to hear. Taking responsibility means claiming ownership not just of your actions, but of every single outcome in your life. Think about this. Every situation you're in right now, your job, your relationships, your health, your finances, you played a part in creating it. Yes, external factors exist. Yes, life isn't always fair. But the moment you say, it's not my fault, you surrender your power to change it. Let me be crystal clear. Taking responsibility doesn't mean taking blame. Blame is about the past. Responsibility is about the future. Blame asks, who caused this? Responsibility asks, what am I going to do about it? This distinction is crucial because it's the difference between powerlessness and empowerment. Here's where it gets challenging. You must take responsibility even for things that don't seem to be your fault. Lost your job due to company downsizing. Take responsibility for not having multiple income streams. Relationship ended badly. Take responsibility for the choices that led you there. Health issues running in your family. Take responsibility for your lifestyle choices now. The blame cycle is comfortable, because it absolves you of the need to change. When you blame the economy, the government, your boss, your parents, or your circumstances, you're saying, I am powerless to change this. But when you take responsibility, you're declaring, I have the power to change this. Most people live their entire lives in what I call the responsibility gap, the space between what happens to them and how they choose to respond. They let their circumstances dictate their actions rather than letting their actions shape their circumstances. Taking responsibility means understanding that while you can't always control what happens to you, you have absolute control over how you respond. It's about recognizing that your life today is the sum total of your choices, not your circumstances. Here's a powerful truth. The level of success you'll achieve is directly proportional to the amount of responsibility you're willing to take. Want average results? Take average responsibility. Want extraordinary results? Take extraordinary responsibility. This responsibility mindset changes everything. Instead of saying, I can't afford it, you ask, how can I generate the resources? Instead of saying, I don't have time, you ask, how can I prioritize this? Instead of saying, I don't know how, you ask, where can I learn? Remember this, every time you make an excuse, you're giving away your power. Every time you take responsibility, you're claiming your power. It's that simple and it's that profound. The choice is yours. Will you continue to let your excuses write your story, or will you take responsibility and become the author of your destiny? Because the moment you truly embrace responsibility is the moment your excuses begin to die. Let me share something powerful with you. Every excuse you make is actually a hidden opportunity waiting to be uncovered. The very thing you're using as a reason why you can't is precisely what you should be using as fuel for why you must. Here's how we're going to transform those excuses into action. First, we need to understand that every excuse has an opposite, a counteraction that completely nullifies it. I don't have time becomes I choose to make time. I don't have the money becomes I will find creative ways to fund this. I don't know how becomes I commit to learning. Let me give you a practical framework. Take your biggest excuse right now, the one that feels the most real, the most insurmountable. Write it down. Now ask yourself 3 questions. What if this excuse didn't exist? What would I do differently? What's the smallest step I could take right now? See, most people get paralyzed because they're looking at the entire mountain they need to climb. But you don't climb a mountain in one leap. You climb it step by step. Your excuses make you focus on the peak when you should be focusing on the next step. Here's the action formula I want you to implement. For every excuse you identify, create 3 immediate action steps. Not tomorrow, not next week, immediate. If your excuse is, I don't have the network, your action steps might be 1, reach out to 1 new person today. 2, join 1 relevant online community right now. 3, schedule 1 coffee meeting this week. The key is to make these actions so small, so doable, that your excuses have no room to breathe. Because here's the truth, action suffocates excuses. When you're in motion, your excuses can't catch up with you. Let's talk about resource optimization. Every excuse about lacking resources is an invitation to get creative. Don't have money? Start thinking about what you do have. Time, skills, connections, determination. Don't have connections? Start leveraging what you do have. Social media, local communities, online platforms. Strategic thinking comes into play here. Instead of letting your excuses define your limitations, use them to identify your areas of innovation. Every I can't because woe should be immediately followed by so I will. The transformation happens when you realize that your excuses are actually pointing you toward your path of growth. If you're making excuses about public speaking, that's exactly where you need to focus. If you're making excuses about financial management, that's precisely what you need to master. Remember this, movement creates momentum. The smallest action taken today is worth more than the grandest intention for tomorrow. Your excuses want you to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect circumstances. But perfection is the enemy of progress. Start now, start small, but most importantly, start. Transform those excuses into action steps, those limitations into launching pads, those I can'ts into I wills. Because the only difference between where you are and where you want to be is the actions you haven't taken yet. Everything we've discussed today means nothing if you don't rewire your mental patterns. Your mind is like a supercomputer, and right now it's running on outdated software. The excuse-making program that's been installed through years of self-limiting beliefs. Let's talk about how to upgrade your mental operating system. First, understand that your brain has created neural pathways, automatic thought patterns that lead to excuse-making. Every time you make an excuse, you're reinforcing these pathways. But here's the good news. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity, the ability to create new pathways and weaken old ones. The key to mental toughness isn't about never feeling fear or doubt. It's about moving forward despite them. Start by catching yourself in the moment of making an excuse. That split second of awareness is your opportunity to redirect your thought pattern. Instead of following the familiar path of I can't because, train yourself to immediately ask, how can I? Here's a powerful technique I want you to practice, the even if method. Whatever excuse comes up, add even if and complete the sentence with an action. I'm too tired becomes, I'll take one step forward even if I'm tired. I don't know enough becomes, I'll start learning even if I don't know enough. This simple language shift reprograms your brain from excuse making to solution finding. Resilience isn't born in comfort, it's forged in challenges. Every time you push past an excuse, you're strengthening your mental muscles. Think of it like going to the gym. Each rep of choosing action over excuses builds your mental fitness. Let's talk about positive self-talk, but not the fluffy kind. I'm talking about strategic self-dialogue. When your inner voice starts listing all the reasons why you can't, interrupt it with evidence of when you did. Keep a victory log, a record of times you proved your excuses wrong. Reference it when your excuse-making machinery kicks into gear. Create what I call pattern interrupts. When you catch yourself in an excuse loop, do something physically different. Stand up, change your posture, move to a different location. This breaks the physical state associated with excuse making and creates space for new thought patterns. Your mind will always try to protect you from potential pain or failure. That's its job. But you need to teach it that growth happens outside of this protection. Start celebrating discomfort as a signal of growth rather than a warning to retreat. Remember this, your new mental patterns need to be stronger than your excuses. They need to be so ingrained that choosing action becomes your default response. This doesn't happen overnight. It happens through consistent, conscious choice. Every morning before your feet hit the floor, make this declaration. Today, I choose growth over comfort. I choose action over excuses. I choose possibility over limitation. Your mind will believe what you repeatedly tell it. These new mental patterns aren't just about achieving goals, they're about becoming someone who simply doesn't entertain excuses anymore. They're about evolving into a person who sees challenges as opportunities, obstacles as stepping stones. Let's get tactical. I'm about to share with you a formula that turns excuse killers into achievement machines. This isn't just goal setting, this is goal achieving architecture. First, let's talk about goal setting with a difference. Most people set goals that excite them, but don't commit them. Here's what you're going to do differently. For every goal you set, immediately identify the most likely excuse that will try to stop you. Then create a preemptive strategy to neutralize it. You're not just planning for success, you're planning for the resistance that will try to prevent it. Your goals need a tracking system that makes excuses impossible. Break down every goal into daily measurable actions. Not weekly, not monthly, daily. Why? Because excuses thrive in vagueness but die in specificity. When you know exactly what needs to be done today, excuses have nowhere to hide. Create what I call excuse-proof metrics. These are progress markers so clear, so undeniable, that your usual excuses become irrelevant. Don't say, I'll work on my business. Say, I'll contact 10 potential clients before noon. Don't say, I'll get in shape. Say, I'll do 30 minutes of specific exercises at 6 a.m. Build an accountability system that doesn't accept excuses. Find an accountability partner who has permission to be brutally honest with you. Share your daily metrics with them. No stories, no explanations, just results. This person's role isn't to make you feel better about your excuses. It's to make you feel uncomfortable with them. Your success metrics need to be binary. You either did it or you didn't. No partial credit, no I tried. This might sound harsh, but ambiguity is where excuses breed. When you have crystal clear metrics, you eliminate the gray area where excuses live. Performance evaluation isn't about judgment, it's about data collection. At the end of each day, score yourself. How many excuses did you make? How many did you kill? How many planned actions did you complete? Keep this data. Review it weekly. Look for patterns. Your excuses have patterns. Once you spot them, you can predict and prevent them. Remember this formula. Clear goals plus daily metrics plus ruthless accountability plus binary evaluation equals excuse-proof achievement. This isn't about perfection, it's about progression. Every day you follow this formula, you're not just moving toward your goals. You're becoming someone who achieves despite obstacles, who succeeds despite challenges, who wins despite excuses. Let me tell you something nobody talks about. The moment you decide to kill your excuses, you'll face resistance like never before. Your comfort zone will fight back. People around you will resist your change. Your own mind will try to pull you back to familiar territory. Let's talk about how to push through all of that. First, understand that setbacks aren't failures, they're feedback. When you hit a wall, that's not a signal to retreat into your excuses. It's information. It's data. It's your opportunity to prove that you're serious about this transformation. Every setback is asking you one question. How badly do you want this? Opposition will come from unexpected places. Friends might try to pull you back into old patterns. Family members might question your new standards. Colleagues might resist your improved boundaries. Remember this. Their resistance is often a reflection of their own excuses, not a commentary on your capabilities. Here's how you handle criticism. Turn it into fuel. When someone says you can't, translate that in your mind to watch me. When they say it's impossible, hear it's impossible for someone who makes excuses. Their doubt is their limitation, not yours. Momentum is your best friend in this journey. Build it through small wins, protect it at all costs. One completed task leads to another. One excuse killed makes the next one easier to tackle. But here's the key. You have to protect your momentum from what I call the entropy of excuses, the natural tendency to slip back into old patterns. Let's talk about breaking through barriers. Every major goal has what I call excuse checkpoints, points where most people would normally quit. These are your opportunities to separate yourself from the excuse makers. When you hit these points, double down. When others would retreat, advance. Create a resistance response protocol. When you feel pushback, whether internal or external, have a pre-planned response ready. Don't wait until you're in the moment to decide how you'll handle it. Decide now, write it down, make it your default reaction to resistance. Here's a powerful truth. The size of your success will be determined by the size of the resistance you're willing to push through. Everyone can perform when it's easy. Champions are made in moments of maximum resistance. Build what I call resistance resilience. This means becoming someone who expects resistance, welcomes it, even gets excited by it. Because you understand something fundamental. Resistance means you're pushing boundaries. It means you're growing. It means you're leaving your excuses behind. Remember this, every excuse you've ever made was born in a moment of resistance. Now, every piece of resistance you face is an opportunity to prove you're no longer an excuse maker. You're an excuse killer. The path forward isn't about avoiding resistance. It's about becoming someone who thrives on it. Someone who sees obstacles not as stop signs, but as challenges to be overcome. Someone who understands that the best achievements are on the other side of the greatest resistance. Your excuses or your dreams, that's the choice you face every time you hit resistance. Choose wisely. As we come to the end of our time together, let's be clear about something. Everything we've discussed today means nothing without action. Knowledge without implementation is just entertainment. You've learned about the nature of excuses, their roots, how to identify them, and how to kill them. Now comes the real test. What will you do with this information? Let me leave you with this thought. Right now, at this very moment, you're making a choice. You're either choosing to continue living in the comfortable prison of your excuses, or you're choosing to break free and step into the uncertain but unlimited territory of your potential. Your excuses have a price tag, and it's not just measured in missed opportunities or unfulfilled dreams. It's measured in the person you could have become, but didn't because you chose comfort over growth, safety over possibility, excuses over action. Here's what I want you to do right now. Take out your phone, open your calendar, and mark this date. This is your line in the sand. This is the day you decided to stop being an excuse maker and became an excuse killer. This is the day everything changed. Starting tomorrow is an excuse. Starting when conditions are perfect is an excuse. Starting when you feel ready is an excuse. The only moment you have guaranteed is right now. Remember, every great achievement in human history was created by people who had just as many reasons to make excuses as you do. The only difference was their decision to act anyway. So I challenge you, no, I dare you, to live the next 24 hours without a single excuse. Then extend it to 48 hours, then a week. Watch how your life transforms when you replace I can't with I will. The door to your excuseless life is right in front of you. The handle is within your reach. The question is, will you open it? The time for excuses is over. The time for action is now. What will you choose? Now, what will you choose? Now, what will you choose? Now, what will you choose?